Yeah, no matter what angle you looked at that, it was some bizarre viewing over there in Tokyo in front of the world's press, Liz. I've heard so many different explanations that it was a man trying to assert authority on such a big stage over a woman, or that John Coates himself has come forth and said, no, it was actually pre-planned, and Anastasia thanked him afterwards. What was your take on what we saw so publicly?
James, I think it was a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. John Coates is someone who I've known for a number of years. I've sat on actually a board with him and I've seen up close how he works. Nothing is spontaneous, especially when he speaks publicly with John Coates. Oh, you can bet your bottom dollar that that was pre-planned. He's the most Machiavellian person I've ever met. And I tell you, he would take that as a compliment, someone describing him that way. You don't get Olympics in Australia without someone like him driving it. But I've got to say, that, to me, seemed like a big misstep on the world stage for him. I think he's come out of it not looking very well. I suspect it was pre-planned. I doubt, though, that Anastasia Palaszczuk would have bought into it thinking that she might have been belittled in such a public and humiliating manner. So I think all parties will go away and reflect on that. But I think the exchange shows us two things about John Coates and the Olympics. One is just how powerful they perceive themselves to be. They think they're above governments and they can speak to governments like that. But I think the other thing is this is going to give a huge amount of ammunition to those within Australian sport who want John Coates gone from that position. Now, we saw for the first time a few years ago, he was challenged for the first time ever as president of the AOC, and there was a big groundswell of support behind those people. Danny Roche was the candidate to try and unseat him from that position. You can bet your bottom dollar they will stick this in the arsenal and bring it out, because it wasn't a good look for someone who really does normally pride himself on his diplomacy.
I respectfully submit, Liz, that the idea that it was pre-planned for me was absurd. The idea that John Coates would say to the thrice-elected Premier of Queensland, so I'm going to belittle you as the cameras roll, and she says, beauty, and I'll stare at the desk. Please, respectfully submit that is absurd. But whether or not it was pre-planned or it wasn't pre-planned, it was a cringeworthy moment for Australia on the international stage. Here is an international triumph, and what we represent to the world is Dinosaur Australia from the 1970s. He of Dinosaur Australia publicly belittling she of modern Australia. It was ridiculous. And you say it just gives ammunition. I mean, it's not just ammunition. I mean, please, look at this. We are in the third decade of the 21st century. We have one of our unelected officials belittling our elected official on the stage. It was cringeworthy, ridiculous, finished.
Be interesting to see if more comes from the story once the Olympics is done and dusted for 2021. Liz, with Australia picking up the hosting rights for 2032, comes the opportunity for some new sports to go onto the world stage, and everyone's been talking about netball and the possibility that it could become an Olympic sport. Will it, and will it be for men and women?
Well, I'm desperate for it to become an Olympic sport. You know, I coach a couple of little net set go teams on a Saturday morning, and it breaks my heart every 4 years when people ask where netball is, and I can't say to little kids, look to the biggest event in the world and set your goals there. It's just not possible for netball. So I'm desperate for netball to get a gig in 2032. My goodness, we've got 3-on-3 basketball in the Olympics. We've got any number of sports. I'm loving watching all of these new sports, but the opportunity is here for Australia to put its stamp on these games, and what better way to put it on by including the biggest participation sport for women in the Olympics. And might be a nice way for John Coates to make amends for his treatment of Anastasia Palaszczuk, wouldn't it, to put netball into the Olympics?